Behind every global trade deal, a silent struggle for power unfolds. It's a complex game played on a global stage, where nations vie for dominance not through military might, but through economic strategy. These agreements, often celebrated with handshakes and photo ops, mask the intricate web of negotiations and compromises that shape the world's financial landscape. This isn't a war fought with armies but with tariffs, supply chains, and economic leverage. Each tariff is a calculated move, each supply chain a strategic artery, and each instance of economic leverage a carefully deployed weapon. The stakes are high, with the potential to reshape industries, influence political landscapes, and determine the economic fate of nations. For decades, the United States set the rules, acting as the architect of the global economic order. Its influence permeated every corner of international trade, dictating terms and shaping policies to its advantage. This era of American dominance was built on a foundation of economic strength and a commitment to free market principles. Its economic might shaping international commerce, establishing norms, and fostering a system that, while not without its flaws, propelled global growth. The New York Stock Exchange became a symbol of this power, a hub where fortunes were made and lost, and where the pulse of the global economy could be felt. But as new powers rise, challenging the established order, the landscape is shifting. China's ascent has been nothing short of meteoric, transforming it from a developing nation into an economic powerhouse capable of rivaling the United States. This rise has brought with it a new set of priorities and a different approach to global trade. The old certainties are fading, the assumptions that underpinned the previous era are being questioned, and the rules of the game are being rewritten. This transition is not without its challenges, as established powers grapple with the rise of new contenders and the shifting balance of economic influence. In the summer of 2025, a pivotal moment arrived, a turning point that would reshape the future of global trade. The world held its breath as representatives from the United States and China gathered to negotiate the terms of their economic relationship. U.S.-China trade negotiations marked a turning point, a moment where the underlying tensions and power dynamics between the two nations came to the forefront. These negotiations were not just about trade imbalances or market access, they were about the future of the global economic order. Beneath the surface, a hidden war was being waged, a battle for control of the industries and technologies that would define the 21st century. This conflict played out in the shadows, away from the glare of public attention, but its consequences would be far-reaching. China discovered the true extent of its power, realizing that its economic strength had given it a significant advantage in these negotiations. Years of investment in strategic industries and infrastructure had positioned China as a key player in the global economy, using its economic advantages to shape outcomes, influencing the terms of the agreement, and securing its position as a dominant force in global trade. This newfound leverage allowed China to pursue its own interests and challenge the established norms of international commerce. Years of strategic planning and industrial policy had paid off, transforming China into a manufacturing powerhouse and a technological innovator. This long-term vision had enabled China to build a comprehensive industrial base, capable of producing everything from consumer goods to advanced technologies. China now controlled the building blocks of the modern economy, dominating key industries such as semiconductor manufacturing and rare earth mining. This control gave China significant leverage in global trade, as many countries relied on its resources and expertise. Dependency, China realized, is a powerful tool, a means of exerting influence and shaping the behavior of other nations. By controlling critical supply chains and resources, China could exert pressure on countries that challenged its interests. The 2025 talks weren't just about tariffs, quotas, and trade imbalances. They were about something much more fundamental. They were about the future of the global economic order and the balance of power between nations. They were about who would control the foundations of 21st century industry, who would lead the way in innovation, and who would set the rules of the game. The stakes were incredibly high, with the potential to reshape the global economy for decades to come. The world watched as a new dynamic emerged, a shift in the balance of power that would have profound implications for global trade and international relations. The outcome of these negotiations would shape the future of the global economy, redrawing the map of global economic power, signaling the end of an era and the beginning of a new one. The old certainties were gone, replaced by a more complex and uncertain landscape. The events of 2025 set a new precedent, demonstrating the growing importance of economic leverage in international relations. The world had entered a new era of economic competition, where nations would vie for dominance through trade, technology, and strategic investments, revealing how leverage and perception now define international relations, shaping alliances, and influencing the course of global events. The future of international relations would be defined by economic power, strategic partnerships, and the ability to navigate the complex web of global trade. The 2025 trade agreement was less about substance and more about optics. Both sides claimed victory. The US projected strength, while China saw proof of its growing influence. The deal restored a fragile truce, calming markets but leaving core issues unresolved. High US tariffs remained, pressuring China's export economy. China, in turn, made commitments it already intended for domestic reasons. Each leader spun the outcome for their audience, masking the reality of a deepening rivalry. The truce highlighted the widening gap in how Washington and Beijing view their relationship. For the US, it was a tactical win. For China, a strategic milestone. The real story was the shifting balance of power, not the fine print. At the core of China's leverage lies a strategic advantage few fully appreciate. It's a dominance built not on fleeting trends but on the fundamental building blocks of modern technology, our rare earth elements. These aren't your everyday metals. They possess unique magnetic and conductive properties. These are 17 metals essential for modern technology, the unsung heroes behind our digital lives. They are the key ingredients in everything from the screens we stare at to the batteries that power our devices. By 2025, China controlled over 80% of global rare earth production and refining. This wasn't just about extracting the raw materials, it was about mastering the complex processes required to transform them into usable components. These minerals power everything from smartphones to missiles, from electric vehicles to wind turbines. They are the backbone of both civilian and military technologies, making them vital for both economies and national security. Control over these elements translates directly into influence on the global stage. China's dominance was no accident. It was a carefully orchestrated strategy, decades in the making. It was the result of decades of strategic investment and a willingness to bear environmental costs that other nations were unwilling to accept. As other nations closed minds, often due to environmental concerns or economic impracticality, China built a near monopoly, solidifying its position as the world's leading supplier. This gave Beijing a subtle but powerful economic weapon, a chokehold on the supply chain that could be used to exert pressure or gain leverage in international negotiations. The US began to realize its critical vulnerability, a stark awakening to the dangers of relying on a single source for such crucial materials. Dependence on a strategic rival for essential materials, a situation that threatened not only economic stability but also national security. China's control was more than commercial. It extended far beyond simple trade agreements and market share. It was geopolitical leverage, a powerful tool that could reshape alliances and influence global power dynamics. The world's reliance on Chinese rare earths became a key pressure point in the trade war, a constant reminder of the interconnectedness and vulnerabilities of the global economy. In the intricate dance of global geopolitics, rare earth elements have emerged as a critical bargaining chip. These seemingly unassuming minerals, vital for a plethora of modern technologies, have become a focal point of strategic maneuvering between nations. China, possessing a significant portion of the world's rare earth reserves and processing capabilities, strategically played its rare earth card at a tense moment in the 2025 negotiations. These negotiations, already fraught with complexities, took an unexpected turn when the specter of rare earth restrictions loomed large. State media, acting as a mouthpiece for the government's intentions, subtly hinted at potential export restrictions, sending ripples of unease across international markets. The message was clear: access to these vital resources could be curtailed if certain conditions were not met. The mere suggestion of export controls sent shockwaves through tech, disrupting supply chains and raising concerns about the future of innovation. Industries reliant on these materials suddenly faced the prospect of scarcity and increased costs. The impact extended beyond consumer electronics, reaching into the heart of defense sectors. Military equipment, aerospace technology, and other critical defense systems all rely on rare earth elements, making them vulnerable to supply disruptions. The mere suggestion rattled markets. triggering a wave of uncertainty and prompting investors to reassess their positions. Stock prices of companies dependent on rare earth elements plummeted, reflecting the market's anxiety over potential supply shortages. The situation exposed a deep U.S. vulnerability, highlighting the nation's reliance on foreign sources for these critical materials. This dependence raised concerns about national security and the ability to maintain a competitive edge in key industries. The threat was clear, a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of the global economy and the potential for resource control to be used as a tool of political influence. Should tensions escalate, China could cut off critical supplies, crippling key sectors of the U.S. economy and undermining its strategic capabilities. The prospect of such a scenario forced a reassessment of existing policies and strategies. This forced the U.S. to reconsider its hardline stance, prompting a shift towards a more nuanced and pragmatic approach to negotiations. The need for compromise and cooperation became increasingly apparent. In a subsequent move, China then signaled cooperation, offering a glimmer of hope amidst the escalating tensions. This gesture suggested a willingness to find common ground and de-escalate the situation. This was demonstrated by accelerating rare earth shipments, easing immediate concerns about supply shortages, and providing a temporary reprieve for affected industries. However, China made clear this was conditional, linking continued cooperation to progress on other contentious issues. This underscored the strategic nature of their actions and the broader geopolitical context. The episode showed China's new sophistication, a departure from previous approaches, and a sign of its growing confidence on the world stage. China was using leverage as a precision tool, carefully calibrating its actions to achieve specific objectives without resorting to overly aggressive measures. This was not a blunt weapon, but rather a calculated maneuver designed to maximize its influence and advance its interests in a subtle, yet effective manner. The U.S. had to acknowledge a new balance of power, recognizing China's growing economic and political clout. China was no longer a passive player, content to follow the lead of other nations. Instead, it had emerged as an active force in global negotiations, shaping the agenda and influencing the outcome of international agreements. The rare earth threat redefined the rules of economic statecraft, demonstrating the power of resource control in the 21st century and forcing nations to rethink their strategies in a world of increasing interdependence and competition. Rare earths weren't China's only bargaining chip. Beijing also made a strategic concession on synthetic opioids, tightening controls on fentanyl exports. This move addressed a major U.S. public health crisis and gave the Trump administration a political win. For China, it was a low-cost gesture with high diplomatic value. The concession eased tensions and showed China could be both partner and competitor. By mixing cooperation with coercion, Beijing demonstrated a flexible, multifaceted strategy. The opioid move, paired with the rare earth threat, showcased China's growing skill in great power politics. It was a clear sign of a more nuanced approach to U.S. relations. Despite the truce, U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods remained a constant source of pressure. These tariffs slowed China's growth and forced a rethink of its export-driven model. For Washington, tariffs were leverage for future negotiations, not just punishment. China, meanwhile, faced real economic pain. Factories slowed, jobs were at risk, and growth targets slipped. Both sides held weapons the other couldn't easily counter: tariffs for the U.S., rare earths for China. The result was a delicate standoff, not a resolution. The 2025 deal was a ceasefire, not peace. The wall of tariffs stood as a reminder of unresolved tensions. The biggest shift after the 2025 talks was psychological. Chinese officials emerged with new confidence, seeing U.S. demands as less formidable than they appeared. They learned that withstanding initial pressure often led to American compromise. The rare earth episode proved China's asymmetric leverage could force U.S. concessions. This validated China's long-term strategy of controlling critical supply chains. Beijing now saw itself as a co-equal in global trade, not just a rule-taker. The lesson economic dominance can translate into real diplomatic power. China's leaders became more assertive, ready to shape the global order. The psychological victory of 2025 may outlast any written agreement. Analysts saw the 2025 deal as a turning point, a new equilibrium of mutual vulnerability. China's rare earth strategy was hailed as a masterclass in economic statecraft. Experts noted the U.S. reliance on a rival for critical materials as a long-term security risk. Tariffs, while still potent, were losing effectiveness as China adapted. The era of overwhelming U.S. dominance in trade talks was ending. Future negotiations would be more contentious, requiring compromise, not unilateral demands. The rules of globalization are now contested, not dictated. The 2025 talks offered a glimpse into a more uncertain world. The 2025 truce was more than a pause, it marked a new era in global trade. Economic interdependence is now a double-edged sword, creating both prosperity and vulnerability. China's control over critical minerals set a precedent, prompting nations to rethink supply chains. The future will prioritize resilience and security over pure efficiency. Friendshoring and regional blocs may replace global integration. Trade deals will grow more complex, entangling security and technology with economics. The weaponization of dependencies will make broad agreements harder to reach. The US-China rivalry will shape a more fragmented, unpredictable world. The hidden wars of trade are now out in the open, defining the next chapter of global commerce.